Aloha! Welcome back to the Anxiety Coaches Podcast. I'm your host and coach, Gina Ryan, and I'm so happy to be with you again today as we consider the many ways to bring your mind and body back to its natural peace and calm. In today's episode, I'm talking about how to unlearn anxiety. It's a new way of looking at clearing anxiety and moving forward. It's the path beyond coping. So let me ask you this. How many times have you been told to just cope with anxiety, or that you're going to have to cope with it for the rest of your life? And so you better learn the coping management skills because you've been told to manage it. Maybe just you've been told to breathe through it. We talk about some of those things here, to distract yourself or power through it. Now, we don't talk so much about powering through it, which I would also call white knuckling it, but we do talk about breathing through it and distracting ourselves. But what if I told you that coping, while helpful, isn't the whole story? What if coping has kept you stuck longer than necessary? You've heard me say it here before that we sometimes distract, we sometimes breathe through difficult situations. Breathing is a perfect thing to keep you connected to your body. And sometimes in life, you've probably had to power through things, but that isn't the whole story. Anxiety actually feels like it's part of who we are sometimes, when really it's often something we learned or we have actually practiced in order to survive. And anything learned can also be unlearned. Imagine if your triggers, those things that make your chest tight or your butterflies in your belly or your thoughts race, didn't have to follow you around forever. Today, I want to talk about different ways that we can unlearn. And with this unlearning, we can free up our minds in a way that coping really cannot do. We're going to talk about rewiring your mind. And I want you to think back to a moment when you realized something that you believed in for years wasn't actually true. That aha moment that you had. And that's what many people experience when they first hear this. Anxiety isn't always about the trigger itself. It's about the response you've learned around it. Now, we just talked about responding versus reacting in a couple of episodes back, but I'm wondering if you've had that aha moment, realizing that anxiety isn't always about the trigger. Often it's just coming about. We can feel it in ourselves when we have not even had anything we can put our finger on. Now, there's helpful coping advice, things like positive affirmations. We talk about those here. Distraction. I talk about distraction. Or stress management. Yes, these are all useful and they have their place in clearing anxiety panic, but they don't get to the root. We do have to get through particular situations, and those things help you cope, but not to change. They help you get a breath when you're overwhelmed or in a tough situation. It's like having a smoke alarm that goes off every time you make toast. You could wear earplugs, but wouldn't it be better to fix the alarm? That's what unlearning does. It fixes the alarm. It addresses the wiring, not just the noise. There's these invisible threads that come about when we are anxious. And anxiety often starts with these invisible threads. Maybe back in school when you were a kid, you might have raised your hand and stumbled over an answer that you were excited to give. You really thought you had it. And you stumbled over the answer and the classmates laughed. And in that moment, your brain linked speaking out in class or public speaking as it is with humiliation. And then you fast forward 10 years. Now, even giving a work update in a meeting can make your stomach twist and your words go silent in your throat. The brain is efficient, but sometimes it is too efficient. It can't say, "Oh, I've been here before. This is dangerous." Because it doesn't have a judgment about it. It's not figuring it out. It's just, "Oh, I've been in this situation before. This is where the danger happens, where I get humiliated." And it reinforces that connection over and over again. And just a little side note, why would humiliation be linked to danger in our psyche, in our amygdala? Because our ancient selves, if we were to be humiliated and shunned from the tribe and ousted, we would die. So it really comes back to that survival. So even though it's just humiliation, which feels terrible, but we don't die, to our ancient brain, it equates that humiliation with death. The brain is efficient, but sometimes, like I said, too efficient. And it can say, "Oh, I've been here before. This is dangerous." And it's going to reinforce that connection over and over because you're not interrupting it or correcting it or taking charge, being the rider on the horse. No, we're just letting the horse go wherever it wants because it's gone there before. Or think of it like a hiking trail. Walk it enough times and it becomes a well-worn path. And the same thing happens with anxiety. This repetition deepens with the groove. This is why I encourage the use of what's called an unlearning inventory. I don't think I've ever talked about it here, and I don't remember where I read about it, so you will forgive me if that's your thing. This is where you would write down not just the obvious triggers like deadlines or social gatherings, but subtle ones, like the way your body tenses when you hear an email notification or the knot you get in your chest before checking your bank account, right? We all have our own places where our body tenses up. Naming them can be the first step to loosening their grip. Now, another side note here, I know not everyone does well with writing things down like this. Like everything else that I talk about here, take what's for you, what rings your bell, and leave the rest. We don't need to do everything, and we don't need to force ourselves into uncomfortable practices. We might feel uncomfortable doing things that are going near our anxiety, right? When we are facing it, that's different than specifically going into a practice that is going to make you feel uncomfortable. There's so many other things you can do, so let them be. Now, once we've identified what our triggers are that we have learned over time, this is where we got to get down to brass tacks and the work begins. It's not about pushing them away. It's not about us covering them up or just saying, "I see what it is and now I'm done." It's about meeting them differently. Just like in the previous episode, I think it was one or two back, where I was talking about responding versus reacting. This is where instead of reacting when we are triggered or around what is happening, we take that pause. Remember the pause. And we're going to meet these triggers differently. Here's 3 ways that might help you or what it might look like. Mindful observation would be one. The next time you feel that first little flicker of anxiety, I kind of know what mine would feel like, and everybody has their own recipe for their flicker, right? It could be sweaty palms and butterflies in the stomach or something like that before a meeting. So you can pause, use that pause I talked about and notice it. And let's build on the pause. Tell yourself, this is just my brain running an old program. Now, back in the day, we used to call them, it's running an old tape. Well, we don't use tapes anymore, but we certainly all use programs. So this is my brain running an old program. Catching it early interrupts the autopilot. Catching it early interrupts the reaction versus the response. You may not catch it at first. Maybe it will take you only noticing it afterwards. That's okay, because the more you pause and practice, eventually, sooner and sooner, you will catch the old program running, and you can register in your mind and body that you are not in the past, but you are in the present moment with a new way to think about this current situation or trigger. Another thing would be pattern interrupts, and you could try some small actions that actually shift your state. For example, you could take 3 slow breaths. Breath is always with us, and it's always my go-to because it instantly can bring up our parasympathetic nervous system. We could also splash cold water on your hands or your face if you're in a position where your face could be splashed. But even your hands or your wrists with cold water gives a shift. It's a pattern interrupt. And even humming softly can be very effective to interrupt the pattern. And I'm going to do an entire episode on humming eventually, but I haven't quite put that all together yet, so be looking for that. Humming is wonderful. And again, just like our breath, it can always be with us. These kind of sensory shifts tell your nervous system that something different is happening here. And thirdly, we could reframe the entire narrative. If you've always told yourself, I'm terrible at public speaking, this is what I call a negative affirmation, right? We are affirming that we are terrible at public speaking. When someone tells you that affirmations don't work, remember, they work because you got yourself into negative, anxious thinking by saying these types of negative affirmations over and over again. So change the script. Try saying, I'm learning to get more comfortable each time I speak. It's not something you are lying to yourself about. You are learning. You are learning to get more comfortable each time you speak. This isn't toxic positivity. It's rewiring the brain's association with the event. So let me give you an example. Someone once shared with me how walking into their networking events that they had to do for work gave her instant panic. Just thinking about going, she would be panicked. So she practiced noticing her thoughts when she got there, and she would pause for 3 breaths at the door. Or you could also do it before you get out of the car, right? And she reframed the story. She said, I'm not here to impress everyone. I'm here to connect with just one person. So this lightened her load, and she reframed it from having to impress an entire crowd to, I'm here to connect with just one person. And over time, the anxious link weakened. Now, it didn't happen the first time she did it, but she promised herself that she would just go forward with this simple practice each time she had to go into a networking event, which was very common for her. And over time, that anxious link began to weaken, and eventually it evaporates. You don't remember when it was gone, but it ends up being gone. Now, that doesn't mean that she liked the networking events. You know what I'm saying here? We don't have to like it, but we don't have to go down the wormhole with it. We don't have to go into panic. We can still not like networking events. I'm an introvert. I don't particularly care for those kind of things, but I wouldn't have to feel like I had to go down the wormhole when I got to the door, right? I cannot like it is very different than panicking. So don't think you're going to turn into an extrovert if you're an introvert just because you had this switch in your reframing of the narrative. Now, we can build a brand new blueprint for how we're going to create calm. So you can actually retrain your brain by having deliberate exposure. So we'll use a simple one if your trigger is phone calls, and I have people who do not like to make phone calls. You could start small. You can practice by deliberately exposing yourself to calling a friend. An easy one, right? Something that is maybe, again, still you don't like it, but it's more comfortable than having to cold call someone for business. Call a friend. Then you gradually move to less familiar people. Each time you practice without going down the wormhole, you're teaching your brain a new pathway. And remember, again, you don't have to like it, but you're keeping yourself out of the panic and the wormhole. Positive reinforcement can come into play here too. You can celebrate these small wins. We forget to pat ourselves on the back and celebrate. Even give ourselves a mental high five. Hey, I did that without going down the wormhole or feeling panicked. This helps your brain encode the calm response. It's understanding this was important and I did do it differently. You also want to remember how neuroplastic our brain is. And every time you choose a calmer response, neurons fire in a new direction. And over weeks and months, these connections strengthen. They don't connect just once and it's firm and a nice, strong connection. It takes weeks or months for these connections to strengthen. And at the same time, the old anxious pathways begin to fade. It's almost like you're using the old fading material to build your new pathway. It's like paving a new road and letting the old one grow over with weeds. This isn't about becoming fearless. It's about becoming free. Free to respond differently. Free to choose peace. So unlearning your anxiety doesn't just change your inner world, it ripples outward. Imagine how your relationships shift when you're not snapping from stress. Picture it advancing in your career when you're no longer paralyzed by having to give a presentation. Think about the relief when your weekends aren't overshadowed by anticipatory dread. And here's the thing that's going on. This work is ongoing. Old patterns may try to creep back, but you now have the tools to spot them early. And you will take a few steps back. That's okay. Each time you practice unlearning, you're reinforcing your freedom. So let me leave you with this thought. Anxiety doesn't have to be a lifelong sentence. I believe that. I do not go down the wormhole anymore. I have things I don't like. I have things I get nervous about. I have things I get sad or worried about, but I don't go down the wormhole with panic. The same brain that learned the fear can learn to calm. What would your life look like if triggers no longer dictated your peace? That future is possible for you, and it starts with this kind of unlearning. Remember, you are not your anxiety. You are so much more. And I'm so grateful you spent time with me today. Anxiety can really feel heavy sometimes, but when you meet it with compassion instead of criticism, you can lighten that load. And if you found this helpful today, consider passing it along to a friend or leaving us a review. It helps others find us and feel supported also. Until next time, may you be safe, may you be calm, and may you be free from fear. And now for today's quote. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that's from Alvin Toffler. I'll be back in a few more days with another podcast. Until then, be well and aloha.